Hello, my name is Dr. Don Kent, and we are here today with Professor Ron Nelson, representing the Foundation for Physical Reform. We are now dealing with the most current chapter in the solution to America's other AIDS. Ron, what do you have in store for us today?
Well, Don, today we're going to talk about the trade deficit. Everybody has espoused free trade for 20 or 30 years, and it's pretty well documented now that the greatest economic imbalance in the history of civilization is the trade deficit that's been incurred by this country since 1991. In the 1980s, we had a relatively minor amount of the trade deficit, but since 1991, we have a cumulative trade deficit of over $6 trillion. That translates today into the fact that you, the American public, export $2 billion of wealth per day to foreign countries. That's how much you have to give away to maintain your current lifestyle of foreign cars, foreign imports, foreign furniture, foreign clothing, etc., etc., etc. So it has created such a huge imbalance in the world economy because we're exporting our wealth and a lot of foreign countries are benefiting from us providing our wealth to them, Don.
Thank you, Ron. We have been recently exposed to a new terminology, the sovereign wealth funds. We need your insight as to what they are and how they impact Americans. Yes indeed. The sovereign wealth funds are a big business in the world economy, and most Americans don't even know who they are. Secretary Paulson, the Treasury Secretary in the Bush administration, was asked about them recently in a speech in New York City, and he refused to answer. Well, it's very obvious why he refused to answer. The facts are, and let's take a simple example of a Toyota car. The car comes in from Japan, goes to the dealership. The American consumer goes to the Toyota dealer, gives the Toyota dealer US dollars, and then the consumer winds up owning the Toyota. The Toyota dealer then gives the US dollars to Mizuho Bank, which is the Japanese bank. Mizuho, in turn, then transfers, of course, the dollar credits back to Toyota Corporate in Japan. Toyota Corporate then gets reimbursed by Mizuho in Japanese yen. And so now, then the Mizuho Bank is now the holder of the US dollars. They in turn exchange the US dollars for Japanese yen with the Bank of Japan, which is Japan's Federal Reserve Fund. Now the Japanese government has your US dollars in their possession, and they transfer it then out of the Bank of Japan into what are known as sovereign wealth funds. Sovereign wealth funds are funds that are owned by foreign governments, and they use these wealth funds under various different names to come into this country and Europe and elsewhere and purchase control of corporations in foreign countries. And to show you how powerful they are, the Chinese have over 1.5 trillion US dollars, Japan has 1.4 trillion, and the sovereign wealth funds of the Arab oil producing states have over $1 trillion of sovereign wealth funds. So anybody ignores them, you're ignoring them at your peril, because they're very powerful, and we're all going to have to deal with them because they have so much wealth that, you know, the perfect example is Citibank in New York, a huge American bank. Well, guess who the largest stockholder of Citibank is? Saudi Arabia. They own over 30% of the stock of Citibank, and that's merely one example of how they're invading us quietly through the various sovereign wealth funds into this country. Ron, that was a very good explanation. What do we do about this trade deficit? Our job with the foundation is to offer solutions
to dilemmas such as the sovereign wealth funds. How would you help advise our readers and all Americans at this point?
Well, either we're going to support American businesses, which will create American jobs, or the economy will be turned over to the sovereign wealth funds, who will ultimately wind up owning control of the U.S. economy. They've already got their hands into the investment banks in Wall Street and many of the large banking institutions and some of the industrial corporations as well. And so you got to say to yourself, if I keep exporting $2 billion a day, I'm not going to have many choices left. I'm going to have to say yes, sir, to the sovereign wealth funds, because they're going to own control of the U.S. economy. And as we have said many, many times, economic armies are much more powerful than military armies. All the chatter on TV about Iraq and Afghanistan and everything else is all well and fine. But meanwhile, we're pumping out $2 billion a day to the foreign countries who are coming back through their sovereign wealth funds and going to buy control of this country. So Americans have a dilemma to face. Either they're going to support innovation and start supporting American companies, or they have to accept the fact that the President and Congress are in the process of becoming puppets to the foreigners who will own control of this country. Evidence of that is very clear. Of the $5+ trillion U.S. debt that's in the hands of the public today, over 55% of it is owned by the foreign governments and corporations. So they already have a very powerful hand in our back pocket in the debt markets. And of course, if they pull out of the debt markets, the interest rates would skyrocket because there's a lack of sufficient domestic persons and corporations who buy the debts. So ignoring the sovereign wealth funds and the trade deficit is at best suicidal. We need to have a national discussion on it, and we also need to face up to the fact that either we're going to support American companies or we'll accept the dire economic consequences.
Ron, as usual, you've given us the hard data. The hard data that the politicians and the industrialists are not interested in seeing America obtain. It's a hard role for you to assume, but that's why the Foundation for Fiscal Reform exists. We're doing on a grassroots level what we haven't seen anybody else attempt to do. We're trying to conserve and preserve America's values as our generation and what we hope future generations will come to expect being a citizen of the United States of America. And we hope our viewers will listen and act. We also hope that for those of you who have not become members, please do so. And we certainly welcome you to our next episode in the continuing saga of the solution to America's other aids. Please stay tuned, and thank you very much for your time.